Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Death at the Movies podcast. My name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I am a licensed funeral director, embalmer, and a sacred death and grief practitioner here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I have worked in the death care industry for the past 10 plus years. I created this podcast because I love movies, I love television shows, and I love death, dying, and grief. I love exploring and having conversations about all of these topics. And I wanted to specifically explore the way that movies, series, and shows include death, dying, and grief in their content, and how this portrayal affects and impacts us as individuals who are going through grieving journeys, will experience death, dying, and grief. And I just wanted to have conversations with like minded individuals and talk about cool movies and how death, dying, and grief are being portrayed. My intention with this first episode is to explore movies that encouraged me to become a funeral director or do the type of work that I do in this industry. And I also want to inspire all aspiring death care professionals to chase their dreams. In order to do that, I kind of want to set the tone by talking about two movies in particular that inspired me, as well as a television show episode that had a very strong and lifelong lasting impact on me. As a movie that I saw as an adult that really solidified for me that a career in the death care industry was for me was the movie Idlewild. And it stars Paula Patton, Andre 3000, and Big Boy. And the movie is about a piano player named Percival, along with his flamboyant lead performer and manager, um, and their struggle to keep their speakeasy in the Prohibition-era South out of the hands of gangsters who want to take it over. And what stood out to me about this movie was that Andre 3000, one of the lead characters in the movie, was a funeral director, and it showed Andre 3000 in the embalming room working on the deceased, and it just really made it look like being a funeral director was a cool thing to do. And coming from a very traditional family where I had an uncle who was a funeral director, but being a woman in this family, and having my family have some resistance to my career choice initially, it just really made me feel like this was something that I could do. Not only that, the music in the film was extraordinary and the storyline was just exceptional. And I just remember going to to the movie theaters. I actually went to the movie theater out in Stone Mountain, here in Georgia. I think it's the Stonecrest Mall that had a movie theater there years ago. I don't know if whether it's still there or not, but just watching that movie with my dad and my stepmom at the time, it was like my eyes just lit up when Andre 3000 would come across the screen. And I remember he had a line in the movie that was basically, I can't remember it verbatim, but basically it was, "I'm the last one that's going to see you." And I remember how much respect and honor he his performance portrayed for the deceased and for the dying. So Andre 3000, if you ever come across this podcast, I just want to say thank you, because your portrayal of Percival in the movie Idlewild really gave me the confidence and just the push I needed to really work towards becoming a licensed funeral director. Now, if this is a movie that you feel like you'd want to check out, which I highly suggest you do, you can watch it on Hulu, HBO Max, or Amazon Prime. The second movie that had a really strong impact on me and really helped me to understand that there was more than one way to do funeral service and encouraged me to think outside of the box when it came to my career in funeral service was the movie The Shack. Now, The Shack is actually based on the novel The Shack, and it came out in 2017 and stars Octavia Spencer, Sam Worthington, and Tim McGraw. I experienced this movie at home, I think on Amazon Prime, but It basically talks about a family that is struggling and suffering through a tragedy. And the lead character, Mack Phillips, spirals into a deep depression that causes him to question his innermost beliefs. Facing a crisis of faith, he receives a mysterious letter urging him to an abandoned shack in the Oregon wilderness. Despite his doubts, Mack journeys to the shack and encounters an enigmatic trio of strangers led by a woman named Papa. Through this meeting, Mack finds important truths that will transform his understanding of his tragedy and change his life forever. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler alert, but the thing that stood out the most to me about this movie and touched me the most was the scene where Mack actually gets to bury his daughter. And in the film, they depict a beautiful alternative green burial where she's shrouded instead of being inside of a casket or container. And that to me just was so indicative that there's so many things that can be done and ways that we can create memorable celebrations of life for those that have passed away that are different from the traditional burials. And the way that they depicted Mack's grief and his journey with grief in the movie was palatable. And I remember around the time that I saw the film, I was working through a lot of my own grief with my uncle that I mentioned a few moments ago. And I could really relate to the faith struggle that Mack was encountering and just all of the emotions that the film really takes viewers through the stages of grief. And I remember just watching the film and sobbing my eyes out, but not feeling sad. I felt like I wasn't so alone and isolated in my own grief watching this film. So kudos to the producers, the writers, and the originators of the book, The Shack. I was so touched and just moved by this movie that I decided to make it the first movie and book that we discuss in the Grave Woman's Book and Movie Club. And in order to join, you will need to sign up for the Discord group through my website, and it costs $5 per month. And we're going to meet later on in the month and talk about the book and watch the movie together and discuss the movie. So if you're interested in joining the Grave Woman's Book and Movie Club, you can do so by visiting www.thegravewoman.com and clicking on the Book and Movie Club tab and subscribing for membership. It's going to be a great time and a great conversation and a way to connect with others who are experiencing several types of grief. We have several rooms, chat rooms within the Discord where you can interact with other professionals, other students, other people experiencing similar types of loss. And of course, you'll get the opportunity to chat with me on occasion and participate in the book club and the movie night with me as well. So if you're not interested in the book and movie club and you'd like to watch the film independently, you can do so on Hulu, Amazon Prime Video, as well as YouTube. So last but not least, I wanted to talk about a television show episode that touched me tremendously and made the concepts of death, dying, and grief very real for me. And that was Family Matters, the gun episode. Family Matters stars Reginald Darius McRae as Eddie Winslow, Kelly Cheyenne Williams as Laura Winslow, and Jaleel Williams as Steve Urkel and Stefan. Did I do that? I mean, how many of you guys remember that show from your childhood and early teenage years? I know it was a part of the Friday night, I think on one of the cable channels. And every Friday night, I would be glued to the front of the TV watching Family Matters. And the episode focuses on a harrowing experience at a school with a violent female gang that has shaken Laura and leads to her wanting to buy a gun to defend herself, and Steve Urkel begging her to change her mind. And around the time this episode came out, I was just going into middle school. And I have to tell you that after seeing this episode, I was completely terrified to go to high school. Even though it was about 2 or 3 years away, I was terrified because this was around the time when think the events like Columbine were happening, and we started hearing a lot or becoming aware of school shootings taking place, particularly in high schools. And it just really had me fearful of being in a high school environment. And I remember talking to my dad, I think, about the way I was feeling. And I had fears that if I were to go to high school, I was going to die because of the things that I saw on television, and then seeing this episode play out the way that it did. And I know the intention of the writers were to bring awareness to school violence and school shootings, especially in high schools. But it just really scared me. The episode really scared me. And I'm curious to know if there are any episodes or movies or TV shows or, just anything that you all have seen in TV that have just made you really afraid and created a response of fear in your life. This also made me not want to have anything to do with guns or be around anyone with guns. So I think the producers were really smart in the way that they created this episode, but it really had a lifelong lasting impact on me. Even today, I'm not going to say I will never own a gun, but they just make me so uncomfortable. And I think a lot of that stems from the realization that I saw on this show that, guns really can hurt and kill people. I would suggest that everyone, if you can, take a look at Family Matters, the gun episode, and you can do so on Hulu or Amazon Prime. So that's the end of our first episode. I thank you so much for taking your time and spending it with me for these last few moments. I'd like to close with the thought that television and movies truly has the power to touch us all. I would like to know what some of your favorite movies and television shows are, and how death, dying, and grief have been portrayed in those shows, so that we can discuss it in future episodes. If you'd like to be a participant, please email me directly at thegravewoman@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on social media and YouTube at The Grave Woman. Live life, love hard, and I'll talk to you next time.